Friday, July 18, 2014, it seemed like an ordinary morning in Benton Hills. Shortly after 11 a.m., Florida State University law professor Dan Markle spoke with a friend by phone while casually entering his driveway. Yet when Dan neared his residence, his call was suddenly disrupted by something unusual. "There's someone in my driveway and I don't recognize them," he said. That disturbing remark became the final words his friend heard from him. The connection abruptly ended. A short time later, across the road, neighbor James Geiger heard a booming noise. Peering through his window, he saw a metallic Prius racing away from Dan's home. Worried about a possible burglary, Geiger went over to check. Inside the running vehicle, he discovered a horrifying scene. Dan Markle was barely alive. The neighbor dialed 911 right away after witnessing the incident.
911, what's your emergency?
We heard a loud bang and the car pulled away from next door. I came over and looked in, the garage door was up, and I thought the gentleman was backing out. And I went back to my house, but he never backed out. And I came back over, and his driver's side window was shattered, and he's spattered and can't answer. He's inside. I don't know if somebody tried to shoot him or if he shot himself or what. I don't know. He sent an ambulance in a hurry.
At first, it appeared to be a heartbreaking, random theft that turned fatal. Yet, James Geiger's account of the escaping Prius would ignite an enormous probe lasting years before revealing a ruthless interstate murder-for-hire scheme extending into the uppermost circles of an affluent, influential family.
He shocked all of us. This is a terrible tragedy.
Police have yet to name a suspect in the case.
Daniel Markle entered the world on October 9, 1972, and was raised in Toronto, Canada, within a tight-knit Jewish household, the child of Ruth and Phil, alongside his sister Shelley. From a young age, he was characterized as possessing an exceptionally lively and driven personality. During his high school years, that enthusiasm evolved into a focused combination of intelligence, determination, and a clear ambition directed toward the United States. He gained admission to Harvard for his undergraduate studies and later attended its law school. In between, he completed a fellowship in Israel at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and received a master's degree in political theory from Emmanuel College at Cambridge. He graduated from Harvard Law Magna Laude in 2001. He served as a clerk for Judge Michael Daley Hawkins on the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. He then entered white-collar criminal defense practice at Kellogg, Huber, Hansen, Todd, Evans, and Feigl in Washington, D.C. In 2005, he became a member of the Florida State University's College of Law faculty, where he held the D'Alembert Professorship. He was 32 years old and had reached precisely the position he had pursued. At FSU, Markle created the type of scholarly career that fellow academics viewed with both respect and slight astonishment. He was highly productive. He helped establish Prof's Blog, among the nation's most extensively followed law professor blogs, a forum where meaningful legal discussions took place beyond traditional journals, and where Markle became a central intellectual presence. During his time at FSU, Markle encountered Wendy Adelson through the Jewish dating website JDate, a University of Miami law student who held a master's degree in international relations from Cambridge. He was 33 years old at the time, while she was 7 years younger, and she too came from a successful Jewish family in South Florida, with parents who operated a dental practice in Tamarack. On February 26, 2006, they wed in an extravagant ceremony held in Boca Raton, which was reported in the New York Times. Wendy relocated to Tallahassee, became part of FSU's law school faculty specializing in human trafficking matters, and in 2009, their first child, Benjamin, was born. Their second son, Lincoln, arrived in 2010. From an outside perspective, it appeared to be the type of life many people strive tirelessly to create. At the same time, Wendy Adelson had never felt content living in Tallahassee. She considered it limited, isolated, and too distant from the family environment she had always known. In September 2012, during Dan's absence on a work trip, she removed the marital residence, much of the household furniture, the children, the belongings from their safety deposit box, and departed. There was no message revealing where she had gone, no explanation of when she planned to return, or even if she intended to come back. Dan arrived home to a vacant house and discovered divorce documents placed on the bed. He later told friends it felt like his Pearl Harbor. For several weeks, he had no idea where his sons were located. Eventually, he discovered that Wendy had brought them to her parents' residence in Coral Springs. She wanted to remain there. She submitted a divorce filing in September 2012. Dan responded by fighting through the legal system. He possessed legal protections, parental rights, and custody rights that kept Benjamin and Lincoln in Tallahassee while keeping Wendy connected to a place she had grown to resent. The custody dispute became a legal barrier that the Adelson family could not simply remove. Dan's role as a co-parent in Leon County stood as the obstacle separating them from the future they envisioned for Wendy and her sons. To the Adelson family, Dan Markle had become an obstacle. They attempted to pay him so they could obtain complete custody, but Dan declined. By that time, he had also discovered something he never expected to find so quickly: a new relationship.
And I said, "You have a girlfriend now? You're having fun in life again, you're smiling a lot. You have to start celebrating those things and walk away from this negativity."
He was reconstructing his life following an extremely painful chapter. There was no possibility he could have predicted what awaited him. Fast forward to July 18, 2014. After the event in Dan's driveway, he was transported to the hospital, but tragically, he passed away 14 hours afterward. His ex-wife Wendy was taken in immediately for questioning by police.
There was a shooting at your home, or your ex-husband's home, at 2116 Trescott. Okay. Your ex-husband, Daniel, all right, has been taken to the hospital. He's not going to survive.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Wendy expressed grief over Dan's death, yet one part of her interview stood out. She suggested someone may have killed him on her behalf, then directed attention to her middle brother, Charlie.
Something
Who
like
would
this?
do this?
I don't know. That's why you're here, and that's why we're talking. Would you ever ask someone to do something like this?
Not in a million years.
Okay. Do you think someone would do this for your benefit without asking you?
No.
What good does it serve?
I made my brother, his name's Charlie, the one I'm really close to. He makes a lot of jokes in bad taste, and it was a joke he made. He bought the TV for me this morning that got broken, and I was talking to him about whether it made sense to pay to fix it or whether I should get a new one, and it was always his joke that, like, he knew Danny treated me badly, and it was always his joke. He said, I looked into hiring a hitman, and it was cheaper to get you this TV, so instead I got you this TV. He would never.
Charlie Adelson, Wendy's elder brother, was a periodontist with a record of professional malpractice. He was employed at his father's dental practice and maintained a close bond with his mother, Donna, and his sister, Wendy. It was later revealed that by late 2013, Charlie had been communicating with a woman named Catherine Magbanua about removing Dan. Magbanua was 30 years old. She and Charlie had been involved in an on and off relationship that began around 2013. She was also the mother of 2 children with another man, Sigfredo Garcia, who had gang connections in South Florida and the particular type of practical knowledge Charlie seemed to be looking for. It may seem surprising that the motive in this case came down simply to location, not money, not beliefs, not a decades-long pattern of violence or resentment. The Adelson family wanted Wendy and her sons 500 miles nearer to Coral Springs, and Dan Markle's legal position as a co-parent in Tallahassee prevented that from happening. So they chose to remove him. What this means specifically is that Dan Markle's children were the stated motivation behind his killing and the individuals who suffered the greatest harm from its outcome. He was murdered because he wanted to remain present in their lives. They were forced to grow up without him as the direct result of that reality. Reports often characterized what happened afterward as a custody conflict that became fatal. That description is factually correct. It is also ethically incomplete. The evidence presented through 5 separate trials and plea proceedings showed a family that viewed a father's legally protected ability to remain connected with his children as a barrier, and hired others to permanently solve that problem. The difference is significant. This was not a moment of anger, not a spontaneous decision, but a calculated, outsourced, financially arranged choice made at least 9 months before the murder, to take the life of a man whose only influence was a custody arrangement he had fought to preserve. His sons were the motive, and his sons were the ones who remained afterward. Garcia, through Magbanua, recruited his close associate Luis Rivera, a longtime acquaintance who was at that point a recognized member of the Latin Kings network in North Miami. The operation demanded multiple participants. Rivera would join him. The payment arrangement was created at a distance from the Adelson family. Donna oversaw the management of the family dental office. Subpoenaed documents from the Adelson Institute would later reveal that Donna had issued 44 separate checks to Catherine Magbanua, routine payments from the practice's financial accounts. There was no recorded position for Magbanua, no employment timetable, and no evidence showing any duties she carried out. The payments continued through April 2016. Garcia and Rivera conducted a scouting journey to Tallahassee in early June 2014, arriving on the 4th and remaining until the 6th. They knew their objective. They had a leased Toyota Prius. They stayed at motels, learned the area and travel path, and returned to South Florida without carrying out the task. 6 weeks afterward, they returned. On July 16th and 17th, 2014, Garcia, Rivera, and Magbanua returned to Tallahassee and checked into motels once again. The next morning was a Friday. Dan Markle got out of bed. He placed his sons in the vehicle and drove them to daycare, leaving them there shortly before 9 a.m. He then traveled to Premier Health and Fitness Center on Miccosukee Boulevard. Recordings from the gym and cameras installed along a city bus route showed a green Toyota Prius arriving within the same time frame, following him there. At 10:38 a.m., Markle exited the gym and headed toward Thomasville Road. The Prius continued behind him. Several roadway cameras followed both vehicles as they moved through the neighborhood toward Benton Hills. Around 11 a.m., Dan Markle entered his driveway on Trescott Drive while remaining on the phone with someone he knew. He told the person on the other end, "Somebody's coming in behind me." The caller then heard what investigators described as a forceful grunt, followed by indistinct noises in the background and then difficult breathing. Dan never replied again. A medical examination later confirmed he had suffered 2 gunshot wounds from intermediate distance, one to the forehead and one to the left cheek. A neighbor heard the gunfire and looked outside just in time to see a Toyota Prius backing away from Markle's driveway. Benjamin and Lincoln Markle were still at daycare. Dan Markle was taken by ambulance from his Benton Hills driveway to a nearby hospital. He never regained consciousness. On the morning of July 19, 2014, he was pronounced deceased. Roughly 90 minutes after the shooting, Sigfredo Garcia's phone records revealed the first call he placed. He contacted Catherine Magbanua. That same day, phone records revealed a pattern of communication. Magbanua and Garcia exchanged calls repeatedly. Magbanua and Charlie Adelson spoke several times throughout the afternoon and evening. Later that night, Magbanua traveled to Charlie Adelson's home in South Florida. She had gone there to receive the money. Charlie, she would later state, told her that his parents had just departed the house. The cash she was given was wet and moldy because, according to her, Donna Adelson had physically washed the bills. Tallahassee police opened the investigation within hours, creating a dedicated tip line within days. They had almost no evidence to begin with. Dan Markle had no identifiable enemies investigators could immediately locate. No possessions had been stolen. No clear motive could be seen from the outside. What they had was the Prius. The vehicle had appeared on several surveillance recordings. It contained a SunPass transponder, an electronic toll device that was uncommon in Tallahassee at that time. This was a clue connected to South Florida, to another location. Investigators followed that SunPass lead for nearly 2 years. In 2016, the records brought them to a rental facility in Miami. The Prius had been leased. Documents connected it to 2 men, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. Garcia was captured in an ATM photograph in Pembroke Pines on the day of the trip, wearing a white long-sleeved shirt while inside the same vehicle. An unidentified witness informed investigators about a June 2014 meeting with Garcia and Rivera at a Tallahassee motel 1 month before the murder, where Rivera was seen holding a revolver, matching the type investigators believed was used in the shooting. By April 2016, investigators had gathered enough of the evidence to understand who was positioned at the heart of the conspiracy. However, they required something that would make the Adelsons speak, to create fresh conversations over monitored calls that could later be presented in court. They dispatched an undercover FBI agent to locate Donna. The agent approached her outside her Miami condominium. He claimed to be the brother of Luis Rivera, a person Donna knew had been connected to what occurred in Tallahassee. He gave her a flyer, a printed article about Dan Markle's killing with a handwritten amount added to it, $5,000, along with a phone number. He helped your family with this problem you guys had up north. He's going through some rough times, and I want to make sure that you take care of what he's going through the way you're taking care of Katie and Toto." Donna Adelson replied that she had no idea what he meant. The first call she placed after leaving was to her son. The next day, Charlie met Catherine Magbanua at the Dolce Vita restaurant in Miami. A recording device captured their discussion. At first, the audio contained 2 overlapping layers, with the restaurant noise overwhelming and the voices blending too closely to be confidently presented in court. It would take 6 years before technology advanced enough for the recording to be properly enhanced. The Adelsons had created a private term for Dan Markel's murder. They referred to it as the TV. By the spring of 2016, almost 2 years after the shooting, that coded phrase had become so familiar in their conversations that Donna and Charlie could mention it during a phone call without hesitation. They used the name of a household item, a piece of furniture, to represent what they had organized in Tallahassee. That was not the language of individuals worried about being discovered. It was the speech of people who had repeatedly believed, until that point, that they were untouchable. The FBI's choice to confront Donna personally, to place a newspaper article and a handwritten payment amount in her hands outside her residence, was meant to create the first real feeling of being located, of someone understanding what had happened. Donna's first call after the meeting was not made to a lawyer. It went to Charlie. The communication pattern that followed, with Charlie contacting Magbanua, then Magbanua trying to determine the identity of the undercover agent, followed by calls moving back through the family, reveals something significant about the way this group functioned and how long they had continued without facing consequences. A sense of immunity builds over time. It alters how people act. By 2016, the Adelsons had been discussing the murder of Dan Markel in code on secured phones for the better part of 18 months. The bump gave investigators something to listen to. In May and June of 2016, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera were taken into custody. Rivera, who was already serving time in federal prison for an unrelated racketeering case, agreed to a plea agreement within months. He accepted second-degree murder charges and a 19-year sentence in return for his cooperation and testimony. He explained the framework of the operation, the leased Prius, the motel visits, the scouting trip, and the payment arrangement. He stated that the motive, as he understood it from Garcia, was straightforward. The individuals who hired them wanted the woman to regain custody of her children. He claimed he had no knowledge that anyone was going to be killed. Catherine Magbanua was arrested as well in October 2016 and charged with first-degree murder. The first trial began in September 2019, 5 years after the shooting. Garcia and Magbanua faced trial together. Prosecutors presented the entire case. They introduced phone records, SunPass records, surveillance footage, Rivera's account, questionable payroll documentation, and a series of calls placed on the day of the murder. Garcia could not provide a convincing explanation for his location on July 18, 2014. The evidence showing he was in Tallahassee that morning was extremely difficult to dismiss. On October 11, 2019, the jury reached its decision quickly. They convicted Sigfredo Garcia of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. 4 days afterward, a judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. However, the outcome was far less certain for Magbanua. The jury could not agree. 10 members wanted a conviction, while 2 refused to change their position. Judge James Hankinson declared a mistrial. She returned before another jury in May 2022. This time, Luis Rivera provided a detailed account of how the entire plan was arranged, who coordinated it, how the money was transferred, and the conversations that occurred shortly before the killing. On May 27, 2022, the jury convicted Catherine Magbanua of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation. By the end of July, she had received a sentence of life without parole, along with 2 additional 30-year terms, all ordered to be served consecutively. Charlie Adelson was not indicted until April 20, 2022, nearly 8 years following the murder. Authorities took him into custody the next day, and his trial started on October 23, 2023. Prosecutors presented an overwhelming amount of evidence. Phone records documented Charlie's communications with Magbanua, Garcia, and his mother Donna on the day Dan Markel was murdered. Audio recordings from 2016 captured conversations involving Charlie and Donna shortly after the FBI carried out its undercover operation. Magbanua, who had already been convicted and imprisoned, testified that whenever Charlie discussed the plan with her, before the murder, he would leave the conversation and contact his mother. She stated that on the night of the killing, when she arrived to collect the payment, Charlie told her his parents had recently departed and that the money Donna provided was wet and mold covered because she had personally washed it. Then came the Dolce Vita recording, the one captured the day after the FBI approached Donna outside her residence and later enhanced using FBI technology. Charlie could be heard saying, "If you're going to charge me, charge me." They didn't mention my name, which makes me think these people only know part of the story. On November 6, 2023, the jury found Charlie Adelson guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation. On December 12th, he was sentenced to life without parole with another 60 years added, including 30 years each for conspiracy and solicitation, to be served consecutively. Only days after Charlie's conviction, authorities located Donna at Miami International Airport carrying a one-way ticket to Vietnam, a nation known for not returning fugitives to the United States. She was arrested directly at the gate. During her trial, jurors listened to the FBI sting recordings in their entirety. They heard Magbanua's testimony regarding the washed cash and the vacant home. They heard testimony from women who had been imprisoned with Donna and Magbanua, both of whom stated that Donna had privately acknowledged her participation and offered compensation in exchange for their silence. Donna herself spoke before the court prior to sentencing. "Never in a million years would I have wanted Danny to be harmed or killed, nor could I ever do anything that would leave these two small boys to grow up without him." On September 4th, 2025, 11 years and 47 days after Dan Markle was shot in his driveway, the jury delivered guilty verdicts on all 3 charges against Donna. On October 13th, 2025, Judge Stephen Everett sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, along with another 30 years to be served consecutively. 5 individuals were ultimately convicted in connection with Dan Markle's death. The final conviction did not happen until September 2025. The investigation began with an arrest in May 2016, almost 2 years after Dan's killing. The final person accused was not taken into custody until she was already at an airport carrying a one-way ticket to a country known for refusing to return fugitives. That timeline does not mean the investigation failed. Instead, it reveals what is truly required to expose a murder-for-hire scheme, when the planners are separated from the people who carried out the killing by 3 levels of intermediaries, when no physical evidence directly connects them to the crime scene, and when financial records are concealed through a payroll arrangement created to disguise the payments. This case was not solved because one person confessed, or because investigators discovered a single decisive clue. It unfolded gradually, piece by piece, year after year. A Miami SunPass record appeared. A vehicle was rented under a particular name. A prisoner chose to cooperate. 6 years passed before audio technology became advanced enough to separate 2 voices inside a crowded restaurant. Additionally, an undercover agent simply approached a grandmother outside her condominium and placed a piece of paper in her hands. Dan's mother, Ruth Markle, transformed her grief into advocacy. She worked alongside lawmakers and supporters in Tallahassee, helping advance the Markle Act, a Florida law that allows grandparents to visit their grandchildren when a spouse has been connected either through civil or criminal proceedings to the death of the other parent. This effort directly responded to the custody conflict that placed Dan in danger from the beginning. Something within family law had failed, and Ruth chose to repair what she could. Dan's friend, Jason Solomon, created Justice for Dan Inc. after the murder. The organization quickly expanded, gaining support from thousands of people around the world. Then, 10 years after Dan's death, the group introduced a scholarship in his honor, giving law students an opportunity to continue the work he valued deeply. Benjamin and Lincoln Markle are now living their own lives. Their father never had the chance to witness them. Ruth said, "He was a great father. That's the most important thing about Dan. He loved those 2 boys." If you found this story meaningful, the best thing you can do is share it. Press the like button and remember to leave your thoughts in the comment section. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one. The narrative opens on May 19, 2022 in Mexico City. Nadia Barales prepares for a family meal. She expects her 26-year-old daughter, Karen Itel. Karen is employed by the Tláhuac borough government. Her everyday schedule is highly routine, and she and her mother remain connected each day, speaking each morning and each night as Karen travels to work. That Thursday, Karen planned to visit after her shift alongside her husband, Jose Luis, and their 4-year-old son, Naim. As the afternoon clock nears 3:30, Nadia's phone starts ringing. An unknown number shows up on the display. She picks up, hoping to hear her daughter's voice. Instead, she only hears a woman yelling. The call then abruptly ends. Nadia instantly attempts to call Karen again, yet every attempt goes directly to voicemail. Her texts get no response. Precisely 30 minutes later, someone taps on Nadia's door. Outside stands Jose Luis. He is entirely by himself. Karen is not beside him, and neither is Naim. What immediately catches attention is his surprisingly peaceful and composed appearance. He tells Nadia Karen is missing and claims he came to ask whether she could be there. Based on his account, earlier that morning around 7:00 a.m., Karen went to the National Polytechnic Institute to submit her thesis to her professors. So the question is this: how long can a badly constructed lie truly survive? Here, only a few minutes. Nadia quickly understands her son-in-law's explanation makes no sense whatsoever. Karen had already completed everything at the university, well before that day's events had even begun. 6 days before that, on May 13th, she had formally finished her dental degree. There was absolutely no reason for her to go back to campus. Once Nadia begins pressing him with specific questions and asks where Naim is, Jose Luis refuses to provide an answer. Rather, he only states that he will return home and wait there for Karen to come back. Nadia will not simply remain idle and hope things improve. Alongside additional relatives, she goes immediately to the university. They spend the whole night reviewing security records, searching across the campus area, and even examining the maintenance water tanks. Not one sign of Karen is discovered. The following day, May 20th, matters become even more unusual. Jose Luis collects the official missing person notice that authorities have created for his wife. He takes it to Nadia's residence, yet strangely keeps the document concealed behind his back. Nadia takes the paper from him and is shocked by what she sees. The official description states that the missing woman has a large frame, big eyes, and uses prescription glasses. However, that description does not match Karen whatsoever. Karen is thin, has smaller eyes, and has never used glasses during her entire life. The person who was expected to identify his own wife to investigators had provided details describing a completely different woman. Why would he do that? Was he intentionally guiding everyone toward the wrong search? When Nadia challenges him, Jose Luis displays almost no emotion. He merely raises his shoulders and says the government workers must have recorded the details incorrectly. At the same time, investigators start their routine neighborhood canvass. Close to the couple's residence, they spot a security camera installed outside. The camera is aimed straight toward the entrance of the family's property. An officer questions him about the device, and Jose Luis's father instantly responds with total certainty that it has been damaged for a long time and no longer functions. The investigators do not challenge the statement. They act as though they believe the explanation. However, when the family's attention is diverted, detectives discreetly take out the memory card and discover the camera is functioning flawlessly. The footage captured during the early hours of May 19th does more than challenge everything Jose Luis had previously explained. It provides investigators with their first genuine glimpse into the people Karen had truly been sharing her life with. After examining the recording, detectives rapidly abandon the idea that Karen was simply targeted in a random attack on the street. It becomes obvious that to uncover the truth, they must first examine the individuals closest to her much more carefully. Who was this person capable of calmly playing soccer while an enormous effort to find his wife was taking place? Jose Luis Palomares, who was 7 years older than Karen, had already developed a highly questionable reputation. At the National Polytechnic Institute, he was recognized as a lifelong student who spent years failing even the simplest tests. In reality, he obtained his official qualifications as a licensed dentist only because of Karen. This is a documented fact. Karen personally prepared his entire graduation thesis from start to finish. It is important to notice how effectively certain individuals can alter the details of their own histories and create an entirely different reality. Away from home, Jose Luis portrayed himself as a completely different person. At his workplace, he persuaded all of his colleagues that he was unmarried and legally divorced. That fabricated claim had one goal: concealing an actual affair. As investigators collected additional evidence, they learned that Jose Luis had been involved in a hidden relationship with Karen's immediate supervisor. Karen's situation at home was equally abnormal. Exactly as the investigation was starting to uncover, the couple did not own a residence of their own. Instead, they stayed in a small improvised room that had been divided from the first floor of a 2-level house. The remainder of the large property was occupied by Jose Luis's relatives. Living under the same roof were his father and mother, his brother Enrique, and Enrique's wife Valeria, together with his sister and her family. The residence was a crowded home governed by its own rigid rules. Karen and Jose Luis were permitted to use only a small bathroom on the lower level, whereas the remaining family members used the bigger bathroom upstairs. The individual who held authority over that household was Jose Luis's mother, Marta Beatriz. Interestingly, she was employed as a staff psychologist for a local government agency. However, within her own house, she allegedly operated a system built around constant control and intimidation. Karen was often limited even in ordinary matters, including the times when she was allowed to use water for washing clothes. There was nobody present who could defend her. Karen's father had unexpectedly died just 1 month before her marriage. Following that painful loss, Karen and Nadia established a strict protection routine. They contacted each other by phone 2 times every day and continuously exchanged their live locations with one another. For Karen, her mother became the sole person she could genuinely trust in that situation. As investigators kept assembling these pieces of information, nearby residents revealed troubling details from the past to Nadia. Years before marrying Karen, Jose Luis had moved another woman into the same residence. Neighbors often heard intense disputes coming from behind the fence. Then, one day, that young woman vanished without explanation. At the time, the Palomares family offered everyone the same straightforward story. They said the woman had gathered her possessions and gone back permanently to her hometown in a distant countryside region. None of her family members ever submitted a missing person report. Soon afterward, it seemed as though she had been completely removed from the neighborhood's collective memory. That overlooked event, which had never received a proper investigation, compelled detectives to view Karen's disappearance through a completely new lens. If this family had already succeeded in doing something comparable before, they would probably believe they were beyond consequences. Investigators soon understood that they could not disclose their suspicions at that stage. Instead, they developed an unconventional plan. They instructed Nadia to keep the investigators' increasing concerns entirely concealed from Jose Luis and continue behaving like a trusting mother who was unaware of what detectives were starting to discover. While authorities were secretly transferring copies of the security camera recordings on May 20th, Nadia Barales was carrying out a challenging task of her own. Alongside family members, she spent the day distributing missing person posters around the neighborhood. As Jose Luis acted as though he had unexpectedly taken a trip, he firmly refused to allow Karen's friends to place posters anywhere close to his home, explaining that he did not want to draw unwanted attention from nearby residents. Does that resemble the actions of a grieving husband? The situation becomes even more unusual after that. Later that same day, officers reached the Palomares family residence to perform a standard inspection, but they found the gates secured. When Nadia discovered what had occurred, she immediately contacted Jose Luis. He picked up almost instantly. At that precise time, while countless people were searching across the city for Karen, he was calmly playing soccer on a nearby field. That extraordinary level of composure was not accidental. Jose Luis believed he had already shifted all possible suspicion away from himself. The previous day, he had provided investigators with a highly unusual account. He confidently portrayed Nadia as an aggressive and challenging woman, claiming that she and Karen had been involved in ongoing disputes. He then carefully implied that if something had happened to Karen, investigators should focus their attention much more closely on her own mother. Due to Jose Luis's accusations, detectives initially viewed Nadia as their main suspect. She was taken in for questioning and subjected to a serious interview. However, rather than arguing or spending time defending herself, Nadia simply unlocked her phone and set it down on the table. Investigators began reviewing years of conversations. Instead of hostility or endless disagreements, they discovered hundreds of messages showing affection, daily good morning greetings, and frequent updates about Karen's location and how her day was progressing. A digital history accumulated across years is not something that can simply be invented afterward. At that point, detectives at last understood who had been deceiving them, and Nadia quietly became their most important source within the investigation. By May 24th, the tension had reached its highest level. Jose Luis was starting to believe that Nadia was cooperating with authorities, and asking questions that were becoming increasingly precise. He determined that this issue had to be handled immediately. He contacted Nadia and repeatedly pressed her to meet with him so they could search together in the distant community of San Gregorio at Laco. He even volunteered to collect her himself, along with several of his relatives. What Jose Luis did not know was that Nadia was inside the investigator's office when the call arrived. Her phone was placed on speaker, allowing the entire investigative team to hear as their main suspect attempted to draw the case's crucial witness into a secluded rural location using an entirely false reason. Naturally, that journey never took place. Investigators concluded they had gathered enough information and acted without delay. With a search warrant in hand, a group of forensic experts entered the Palomar's family residence. Once inside, they discovered something that immediately attracted attention. The home was excessively spotless, and a powerful odor of chemical cleaners remained throughout the rooms. After blocking the windows, forensic specialists applied luminol across the house. Within moments, several areas began shining with a bright blue glow. Significant amounts of blood evidence that had been carefully removed were uncovered in two different places: the downstairs small bathroom and the larger main bathroom upstairs. Yet detectives now faced a much more serious challenge. The enormous, crowded residence was entirely vacant. Jose Luis, his parents, his brother and sister-in-law, along with every other family member, had vanished. And most alarming of all, 4-year-old Naim had disappeared with them, the sole witness who might have understood what had occurred within those walls on the day Karen vanished. The following day, after investigators examined the deserted family residence on May 25th, they finally located and detained Jose Luis. Once placed in restraints, he quickly understood that his original claim about Karen leaving that morning to submit her thesis had completely collapsed. Therefore, he began creating fresh explanations immediately, repeatedly altering his version of events throughout the questioning. At first, he stated that Karen had merely fallen in the bathroom, struck her head, and died in what he called a terrible accident. According to his account, his family became frightened and chose to conceal the incident. Later, after his own explanation began to conflict with itself, he changed to another version, claiming she had been unintentionally shoved during an intense argument inside the home. Near the conclusion of the interview, he presented a third account. This time, he alleged that Karen had abruptly attacked him in an uncontrollable fit of anger, and that he had used force solely in self-defense. It is striking how rapidly a person's story can collapse when investigators present evidence that cannot be denied. Yet even after accepting limited responsibility and attempting to present himself as a helpless victim of the situation, Jose Luis still refused to respond to the two questions that mattered most. Where was 4-year-old Naim, and where had Karen been taken? At that stage, detectives no longer required a confession. The investigation turned toward vehicle tracking analysis. Experts examined terabytes of surveillance recordings from cameras throughout the city and traced the movement of a white pickup truck owned by Jose Lu's father. The footage showed that late on the night of May 19th, the truck had intentionally headed toward a remote location in Xochimilco. It was the exact abandoned area of San Gregorio at Laco where Jose Luis had attempted to draw Nadia days earlier by pretending they would carry out another search. On the morning of May 26th, police search crews reached the area together with Karen's mother. It was a huge, secluded location filled with unfinished concrete buildings. During their examination of the surroundings, investigators spotted several unknown men standing nearby. They made no attempt to escape. Instead, they remained at a distance, closely observing every action taken by the search teams. When detectives discovered their identities, the outcome was shocking. They were revealed to be distant members of the Palomares family. They had been watching over vacant concrete structures that were locked with enormous padlocks. None of those buildings contained anything valuable. In fact, investigators believed these individuals were serving as observers, monitoring whether police would uncover what had been concealed there. The fact that several empty, tightly secured buildings were being guarded by relatives of the same family pushed detectives toward a troubling theory. They began wondering whether this remote property had been used for comparable reasons long before Karen went missing. The examination of the enormous open area continued for multiple days. Investigators proceeded carefully, searching section by section, yet the ground seemed completely untouched. Everything shifted on May 31st. Nadia, physically and emotionally drained, was walking through the area during another search effort when she suddenly stumbled. For a reason she could not understand, something caused her to stop. She demanded that the search team immediately pause and excavate that precise location, even though there was no indication that the earth had been disturbed. The team started digging, although many remained doubtful. There were no obvious marks showing recent digging. At a depth of around 5 feet, a shovel hit something firm. Within the hole, searchers discovered Karen Eitel. The uncertainty surrounding her disappearance was finally ended. From that moment forward, investigators had only one responsibility remaining: combining the digital proof, forensic discoveries, and witness accounts allows investigators to recreate, minute by minute, what truly took place behind the sealed doors of that residence before the white pickup truck traveled into the abandoned countryside that night. To understand the way this crime developed, we must return to the beginning. The morning of May 18th starts seemingly ordinary. Security footage captures Karen passing through the front entrance at exactly 6:50 a.m. Still dressed in her pajamas. A car is already parked outside. Sitting behind the steering wheel is a woman, Karen's supervisor, the same person who had secretly been involved with Jose Luis. Karen approaches her, collects a set of workplace keys, and walks back inside the property. She never heads to her job. Later that evening, sometime around 5 or 6 p.m., Karen has a video conversation with her mother. She appears relaxed while they discuss plans for dinner the next day. So, what occurred during the following hours that completely changed the situation? For a long period, investigators were unable to determine the motive. The turning point arrived only after the case's only eyewitness, 4-year-old Naim, started sessions with child psychologists. Through drawings and carefully directed discussions, he uncovered a disturbing truth that members of the household had concealed. Investigators discovered that Jose's teenage nephew, Alexander, had allegedly engaged in repeated abusive actions toward Naim. That evening, Karen learned about what had been occurring. As any mother would, she immediately went upstairs to confront her sister-in-law and mother-in-law, demanding an explanation. The confrontation soon became violent. According to investigators, the women were the ones who initiated the physical aggression. Karen did not attempt to fight back. Instead, she used her own body to protect her son and repeatedly pleaded for them to allow the two of them to leave the room, begging them not to cause Naim further trauma. The disturbance drew the rest of the family members upstairs. Investigators determined that Jose Luis pushed Karen onto the ground and placed her in a chokehold. Alexander then became involved as well, delivering a powerful kick while Karen was already on the floor. As Jose Luis kept holding Karen down, his father allegedly remained nearby without taking action, while his mother, Marta Beatriz, a licensed psychologist, stayed in the room and loudly encouraged him to complete what he had begun. Later, Naim's statement aligned with the forensic findings with remarkable precision. Medical examiners recorded a severe bruise on Karen's right hip that matched the impact described in his account. Once Karen stopped struggling and displayed no further signs of life, the family calmly shifted their focus toward destroying evidence. They took off her pajamas and put her into the striped blouse she typically wore during daytime hours, attempting to create the impression that she had gone to work. Afterward, they waited until night arrived. At approximately 1:00 p.m., the men departed in the white pickup truck and traveled toward Xochimilco to arrange a burial location. During the journey, investigators believe they briefly encountered a black vehicle operated by other relatives involved in organizing the plan. Near midnight, the pickup came back to the residence. Karen's body was quickly placed into the truck bed, and almost everyone connected to the event entered the vehicle, including Jose Luis's sister, who wanted to personally supervise the burial process. The only individual who remained behind was Marta Beatriz, who carefully cleaned the floors inside the home. At 4:45 a.m. on May 19th, the pickup returned to the garage. The family had come back from the isolated field, washed themselves, and gone to sleep. Now, remember one of the most unusual moments from the start of this story: the woman's scream, Nadia, heard through the phone during the afternoon of May 19th. How could Karen have been screaming if she had already died? The answer exposes how carefully this entire plan had been arranged. Based on investigators' findings, that phone call had been staged. Detectives believe Jose Luis's sister, or perhaps Marta Beatriz herself, used an unidentified phone number to contact Nadia and intentionally recreate the sound of a woman screaming. It represented the final step in their scheme. They wanted Karen's mother to believe that her daughter had been taken somewhere beyond the house, and push investigators toward the false possibility of a random criminal being responsible. On July 1st, 2022, the people in hiding made a serious mistake. Marta Beatrice decided the danger had finally passed and that she could return. Believing suspicion had completely moved away from her, she brought Naim to the government's Family Services Agency. Her strategy was extremely bold. She planned to gain legal custody of her grandson, assuming that the rights of the paternal family would overcome any unresolved doubts connected to Karen's disappearance. Have you ever seen how an excessive belief in one's own intelligence can eventually blind even the most careful individuals? Inside the government building, officers arrested Marta Beatrice. On that same day, Naim was finally out of danger. Crying, he ran toward Nadia and spoke only one sentence: "Thank you for saving me." The memories he later revealed to child experts through drawings and carefully directed discussions became among the strongest evidence in the investigation, leaving the defense with almost no ability to dispute the prosecution's timeline. The courtroom phase of this case concluded in December 2024. Prosecutors pursued the charges under Mexico's femicide statute, arguing that the crime had been committed by several individuals working together. Under local law, the usual maximum punishment for that offense is 70 years in prison. However, prosecutors successfully established two significant aggravating circumstances. Karen and Jose Luis were legally married, and 4-year-old Naim had been inside the room when the assault occurred. Those conclusions greatly increased the punishment. Jose Luis received a sentence of 105 years in prison. His parents, whom investigators determined had directly taken part in the events of that morning, were also found guilty and given substantial prison terms. It may appear that justice was completely achieved, but the reality is rarely so straightforward. 4 additional individuals whom investigators believe were involved that night are still fugitives: Jose Luis's brother, his brother's wife, and the 2 relatives who allegedly assisted in organizing the plan from the black vehicle. Arrest warrants have been issued against each of them, and authorities are still attempting to locate them, but until now they have successfully remained free. The only positive outcome in this entire case is Naim's life today. He is being raised with affection and protection by his grandmother Nadia. He participates in swimming competitions, performs well academically, and proudly returns home with school awards just as Karen once did. To support Naim in dealing with the unbearable loss of his mother, the family organized a symbolic goodbye ceremony. During that event, he wrote Karen a brief letter. In it, he asked her not to worry about him anymore, to rest peacefully because he is now protected and surrounded by people who care for him. This case leaves behind one undeniable message. Regardless of how carefully evidence is concealed or how strongly people shield each other, nothing can prevent someone determined to discover the truth for the person they love. Susan Atkins entered the world on April 6, 1957 in Texas. She was raised within a religious household, and church remained an important part of her life from the earliest days. Her father served as a deacon at their neighborhood church. Therefore, Susan and her brother passed many hours there throughout childhood. Eventually, the family relocated to Stephenville, a modest town situated not far from Dallas. Susan remained consistently quiet and somewhat shy. She wasn't anybody who sought to become the center of attention, and she rarely surrounded herself with large, noisy circles of friends. Yet the people she truly welcomed into her life meant absolutely everything to her. Whenever Susan became close to someone, she regarded them nearly like family. After completing high school with honors, Susan began working at a nearby sandpaper factory. Several years afterward, she encountered a man named Mike. Then in 1980, they became married. Soon after the wedding, Mike decided he wanted to leave Stephenville and attempt living inside a larger city. Susan was not especially enthusiastic about the idea. She shared a close bond with her parents, and until then she had never truly lived far away from home. Yet Mike continued insisting, and in the end she accepted going with him. The couple relocated to El Paso, about 8 hours away, and almost immediately Susan realized it was not where she wished to live. Eventually, she and Mike returned to Stephenville. Several years afterward, the marriage began falling apart. Mike left the area, and Susan remained behind in Stephenville, struggling through the divorce by herself. It was an extremely painful period for her. She grew increasingly withdrawn, more depressed, and for some time, the only genuine comfort she found came from the people who continued making an effort to support her. They regularly checked on her, stayed with her, and offered her at least some hope during an incredibly difficult period. By July 1987, Susan was 30 years old, still dealing with the divorce while working at the factory. On July 28th, Susan's father got a phone call from her boss. He informed him Susan had failed to report for work during the previous 2 days, and that he had been attempting to contact her but received no response. Her father instantly realized something was wrong. Susan treated her job seriously, and she was not the type of person who would simply skip a shift without notifying anyone. He attempted calling her, but after nobody answered, he got into his car and drove to her house. As he reached the front door, he heard the TV playing somewhere inside, but nobody answered the door after he knocked. Then he tested the handle and discovered the door was unlocked. So, he walked inside and began calling out for his daughter. But the only noise he heard in return was the TV playing from the living room. When Susan's father entered her bedroom, he instantly recognized that something was wrong. The bed had obviously been shifted from its position. The mattress was partially slipping off the frame, while ripped bedding lay strewn across the room, mingled with clothes covering the floor. By then, he was beginning to panic. He was preparing to leave the bedroom when something different caught his attention. The bathroom door stood slightly open, so he walked toward it and glanced inside. To his horror, he discovered Susan. Her body was slumped across the side of the bathtub. She was completely unclothed, and her hands had been bound behind her back using a t-shirt. Despite the shock, with his mind struggling to accept what he was witnessing, Susan's father realized almost instantly that his daughter was dead. There was nothing he was able to do to rescue her, so he rushed from the bathroom and contacted police. In a small town like Stefanville, murders were incredibly uncommon, so police dispatched every available officer to Susan's house. One of the investigators who reached the scene noticed Susan's father waiting outside. He knew the man personally, and at first he could not understand why he was present until he remembered that he had a daughter and realized the victim was almost certainly her. Police started examining the scene, and from the instant they entered, it became obvious that whoever murdered Susan had displayed a degree of violence none of them had encountered before. The bathtub where her body was discovered had been filled nearly to the top, and the water had become almost black from the blood. After examining the scene, detectives believed the killer might have forced Susan beneath the water until she died. But that was not everything. There was a mark around Susan's neck that appeared as though it might have been caused by some type of cord or rope, and investigators discovered a cord resting on her bed. They additionally observed noticeable makeup marks across her pillow. Considered together, it appeared the killer might have initially attempted to choke her using a cord and the pillow before pulling her into the bathroom and forcing her beneath the water. Since Susan's clothing had been taken off, detectives also suspected she might have been sexually assaulted. The assault was so savage that investigators struggled to view it as random. This did not seem like an ordinary break-in that ended badly. Instead, it appeared somebody had entered Susan's house filled with anger, hatred, and an intensely personal motive to harm her. Susan's body was transported to the medical examiner while police continued examining the house. Inside the living room, they spotted an ashtray on a small table beside the couch, and it was overflowing with cigarette butts. There were also snacks scattered around together with a can of Coke. Susan's father informed investigators that she did not smoke and hardly ever drank Coke, so police started believing those items had been abandoned by the killer. Based on the quantity of cigarettes, it appeared he might have remained inside the house for several hours. From that, investigators began developing a possible reconstruction of what had occurred. Susan might have known this man and invited him inside, then served him snacks and a drink while allowing him to smoke in her living room. As they continued searching the house, detectives discovered something unusual. Every one of the window frames had been nailed closed, making them impossible to open. That suggested Susan had been fearful somebody might attempt to enter her house. Meanwhile, crime scene technicians discovered fresh damage on the front door that might have indicated an attempted forced entry. However, police doubted that explanation because the evidence inside the living room suggested Susan might have willingly allowed the killer inside. Even so, they could not entirely dismiss the possibility that the killer had assaulted Susan first and afterward remained in the living room, smoking cigarettes and eating the snacks. Before long, forensic specialists uncovered one of the most significant pieces of evidence inside the house: a distinct palm print and fingerprints on the bedroom faucet. Judging from where the print appeared, it seemed the killer might have steadied his hand against the faucet while forcing Susan's head beneath the water. The difficulty was that investigators could not simply search the print through a database and wait for a match. During that period, they had to compare it manually with potential suspects. DNA presented an even greater challenge. Detectives knew the cigarette butts might have contained the killer's saliva, but DNA testing was unavailable to them the way it would become today. Therefore, for the time being, the fingerprints remained their strongest evidence. Police also interviewed Susan's neighbors, and one of them provided detectives with an interesting lead. Somebody had spotted a very large man outside Susan's house. They had been unable to recall much more about him, but investigators nevertheless regarded the information as important. After the medical examiner completed the examination of Susan's body, the report confirmed she had been sexually assaulted, but because of the state of her body, experts could not identify the precise cause of death. They observed indications that Susan had been strangled with a cord and suffocated using a pillow. They also found evidence she had been held beneath the water, but they could not determine which of those actions had actually caused her death. The precise time of death was equally difficult to establish. All experts could conclude was that Susan had probably been attacked sometime during the evening, around 2 days before her body was discovered. Following interviews with Susan's family and friends, police found that none of them had actually spoken with her throughout the previous 2 days. Her closest friend Cindy said she had last seen Susan 4 days before the body was discovered. On July 24th, Cindy and her boyfriend Ray planned to attend a carnival in a nearby town, and Cindy chose to invite Susan along. According to Cindy, the divorce had been burdening Susan for months, and Cindy had been attempting to draw her back into everyday life, little by little. She had realized that whenever Susan spent time around other people, whenever she had somewhere to visit, somebody to speak with, something to distract her from everything, she seemed slightly more like herself. Therefore, whenever Cindy had the opportunity, she made sure to include her. She frequently welcomed friends to her house, and recently she had been inviting Susan as well. Gradually, it appeared to be helping. Susan still was not completely okay, but she was beginning to resemble someone who might finally move beyond the divorce and rediscover herself. Then Cindy shared something further with police. She said she had absolutely no doubt that Susan's husband, Mike, was responsible for the murder. Before long, detectives discovered that nearly everyone close to Susan believed exactly the same thing, including her father. Investigators discovered that Susan and Mike's marriage had been strained almost from the start. When they first met, Susan was a reserved, timid woman from a religious family. Mike, by contrast, was more of a defiant outsider. He played guitar, hoped to become a successful rock musician, and rarely managed to keep steady employment. He frequently became involved in fights, and overall, he had the sorts of personality that caused many people to avoid him. When Susan began dating him, both her friends and parents attempted to persuade her against it. But Susan had fallen in love with Mike, and the pair eventually married. Throughout the following several years, Susan was essentially the person holding the household together. She worked at the factory, regularly taking extra shifts, while Mike passed his days playing guitar, drinking beer, and lifting weights outside. From time to time, he would attempt to find a job, but he never stayed long because he was repeatedly fired. 7 years into the marriage, only a few months before Susan's death, Mike received a job offer in Indiana. Susan did not want to relocate to another state. Therefore, Mike simply departed without informing her, and he did not leave empty-handed. He took her car, her jacket, and even the porcelain figurines they had collected together over the years. But Mike did not end there. Before disappearing, he recorded a 30-minute video on tape and left it behind for Susan. In it, he blamed her for the marriage breaking down and continued describing what a terrible wife she had been. Afterwards, Susan began discovering notes concealed throughout the house. Mike had hidden them in various places, and everyone contained insults, accusations, and cruel little messages that appeared intended to wound her. All of this truly terrified Susan, and she told her friends she feared Mike. What frightened her most was that someday he might return, enter her house, and harm her. That was why she asked Cindy's boyfriend Ray to nail her windows shut so nobody could open them from the outside. Ray even offered to loan her a gun, but Susan declined. Cindy also informed police that Susan had only recently filed for divorce, and when she died, she and Mike were still legally married. Based upon everything, detectives started treating Mike as their primary suspect. But there was one major problem. He was residing in Indianapolis, roughly a 15-hour drive away. Police needed to determine whether Mike had returned to Texas around the time Susan was murdered. Therefore, they contacted officers in Indiana. They interviewed him, but Mike denied any involvement in Susan's death. He also insisted he had an alibi for the night of the murder, and that information was relayed back to detectives in Texas. Because of that, the theory that Susan's husband had participated began appearing less convincing, and detectives started considering other potential suspects. Another lead came from Susan's friend Sandy. They discovered that shortly before her death, Susan had begun dating a man named JC. He worked as a bartender, and they had gone out several times. But according to Cindy, the relationship ended almost as soon as it started. Susan had told her that JC was pressuring her for sex far sooner than she felt comfortable with, and that was why she chose to stop seeing him. The lead detectives visited the bar where JC worked to question him personally. Almost immediately, something about him seemed off. JC was tall and heavily built, matching the general description of the man witnesses had observed outside Susan's house. While they talked, the detective noticed something more. JC was smoking and drinking Coke from a can, just like the person who appeared to have spent time inside Susan's living room. That alone proved nothing, but it caused the detective to watch him more carefully. JC also appeared uneasy, and when asked where he had been the night Susan was murdered, he said he could not remember. There was another issue as well. JC's account did not match what Susan had told her closest friend. He denied pressuring Susan into having sex with him, and maintained he had never forced the issue that way. Instead, he claimed the two of them had already slept together, which directly conflicted with what Susan had told Cindy. Then, however, JC said something that made the detectives even more suspicious. According to him, he and Susan had been intimate inside her bedroom. To the detective, that sounded as though JC might be attempting to explain beforehand why his fingerprints or DNA might appear in that room. Even so, JC agreed to undergo a polygraph and willingly provided his fingerprints. The polygraph results were inconclusive, and the examiner could not determine with any certainty whether he had been truthful. The fingerprints created another difficulty. Detectives needed to send them to a laboratory in another city where specialists would compare them manually. Since there was already a substantial backlog, it could require months before they received an answer. By then, the detective already had certain doubts about JC's involvement, partly because he had willingly turned over his fingerprints so readily. While awaiting results, investigators continued examining other individuals. Before long, they shifted their attention toward Ray, the boyfriend of Susan's best friend. Susan knew Ray extremely well, meaning she would have had no trouble allowing him into her house. He was also very tall and heavily built, matching the general description witnesses had provided. Beyond that, there was very little indicating his involvement. At first, the detective did not genuinely believe Ray was involved. However, once they began speaking with him, that opinion gradually started changing. From the very first minute of the interview, Ray behaved suspiciously. He told the detective that ever since the murder, he had been unable to stop wondering how the killer might have entered Susan's house. Since Ray was the one who had nailed her windows shut, he began discussing different vulnerable areas around the house and suggesting possible ways somebody could have climbed inside. Next, the detective asked whether Ray had an alibi for the night Susan was murdered. Ray replied that he had been at a friend's house playing a game called Dungeons and Dragons. That answer immediately drew the detective's attention because during that period, Dungeons and Dragons carried a fairly dark reputation. The game was frequently connected by the media to black magic and Satanism, and even respected newspapers had printed stories promoting those kinds of claims. Consequently, at the time, people who played games like that were occasionally viewed with suspicion, and some believed they could be involved in something sinister or dangerous. Considering the extreme violence in Susan's murder, the detectives wondered whether there might be some sort of connection. However, Ray also agreed to provide his fingerprints without hesitation. Because of that, his potential involvement became less certain. While the detective awaited the laboratory results for the fingerprints, he continued searching for additional suspects, yet none of those leads produced anything. Throughout that time, he repeatedly returned to one question. Was it possible that Susan's husband had somehow carried out the murder and still managed to create an alibi for himself? Therefore, the detective contacted the officers in Indianapolis once again and asked them to double-check Mike's alibi, simply to ensure it actually held up. But to his surprise, they informed him that nobody had truly verified it whatsoever. Officers had interviewed Mike, and he had told them he spent that evening with several people who could verify his story. He also promised to come to the station and provide them with a list of names, but he never did. That meant Mike did not actually have a confirmed alibi. Once the detective realized that, he immediately purchased a plane ticket to Indianapolis and began considering his next move. He could not compel Mike to provide his fingerprints, and he did not want to merely request them and risk alerting him. Mike was not particularly rooted in one location, and if he realized police were getting closer to him, he could easily vanish. Therefore, the detective devised a plan. He and another officer decided to keep Mike under surveillance and wait until he did something that gave them lawful grounds to arrest him. If they could detain him for a different offense, they could obtain his fingerprints without requiring his permission, and Mike might never suspect it was connected to Susan's murder. The officers parked a van near the house where Mike was staying with his brother and started monitoring him. For several days, nothing occurred. Then the detective spotted something interesting. Mike and his brother were conducting a garage sale, displaying various items in front of the house. When the detective looked through his binoculars, he noticed porcelain figurines among the merchandise. As we remember, Susan had told her friend Mike had taken those very same figurines from her home when he left. That provided the detective with exactly what he needed. If the figurines truly had been removed from Susan's house, he could classify them as stolen property, and that was sufficient to justify an arrest. He contacted the local police department, and officers arrested Mike. Once he was in custody, they collected his fingerprints and forwarded them to the lab. At that point, all the detectives could do was wait. By then, the lab possessed fingerprints from Ray, JC, and Mike. In the detective's mind, Mike remained the person most likely to have murdered Susan. Several days later, the results finally arrived. Instead of giving detectives the answer they expected, however, they delivered another unexpected twist. The fingerprints recovered from Susan's bathroom belonged to neither Ray, JC, nor Mike. For the lead detective, those results came as a genuine shock. By then, he had already begun preparing the documents to have Mike extradited back to Texas. Now, however, he had no option except to pull back. For some time, he continued searching for weaknesses in Mike's alibi, but he never uncovered a single piece of evidence proving Mike had returned to Texas around the time Susan was murdered. Ultimately, the detective was left with almost nothing. Even so, he still believed Mike was the person most likely responsible, and Susan's loved ones shared that belief. When Susan's family realized police could not establish Mike's involvement, they filed a civil lawsuit against him. One reason was that Susan had an $11,000 life insurance policy, and Mike was the individual who stood to collect the money. Mike did not participate in the case because he could not afford a lawyer, and the judge eventually ruled in favor of Susan's family. He ordered Mike to pay them $700,000, but there were two significant problems. Mike had no money and no valuable assets. As long as he remained living in another state, there was almost nothing the court could realistically recover from him. Afterward, Mike continued living beneath a cloud of suspicion. For many years, people still believed he had murdered Susan. When he started performing with his rock band, strangers would occasionally approach him after shows and ask directly whether he had truly murdered his wife. In 2005, following one of those performances, Mike was speaking with a friend when their conversation shifted towards Susan's murder. He told her that even 18 years later, people still believed he was a killer, and that carrying those accusations for such a long time had placed a heavy burden on him. His friend believed that was unfair, and she started wondering whether there was anything she could do to help. Eventually, she located an email address for the police department that had investigated Susan's case, and sent a message describing what Mike had endured throughout those years. That email drew the attention of a detective named Don Miller, and he became interested in the investigation. By then, Susan's murder had remained unsolved for years without any meaningful progress. But when Miller started reviewing the evidence, he noticed that 6 cigarette butts believed to have been discarded by the killer were still being stored. He submitted them to the lab, and technicians successfully recovered the DNA of an unidentified man. The profile was absent from the FBI database. Therefore, Miller began with the most straightforward step. He met with Mike and requested a DNA sample, and Mike agreed. Sometime later, the laboratory results were returned. The killer's DNA did not match Susan's husband. For the first time in 18 years, detectives were finally able to eliminate the man nearly everyone had believed was guilty. When Miller phoned Mike and shared the results, Mike broke down in tears. He said the accusations had essentially ruined his life. Miller then began considering how to identify the actual killer, and he noticed something significant. Even after all those years, the fingerprints from Susan's bathroom had still never been digitized. Therefore, he forwarded them to specialists who entered them into an electronic fingerprint database, and almost immediately they found a match. The prints belonged to a man named Joseph Hatley. Hatley's fingerprints had been collected in 1988, 1 year after Susan's murder. At that time, he had been arrested for armed robbery in Las Vegas, but investigators in Texas had no knowledge any of it had occurred because nobody had ever considered Hatley a suspect. Detective Miller started investigating him and confirmed that his name had never appeared anywhere within the case file. Then, while attempting to find a connection between Hatley and Susan, Miller discovered something that completely stunned him. Hatley was Cindy's cousin, and Cindy was Susan's closest friend. That was not the only link. Miller also discovered that Susan might have known Hatley extremely well. He had spent time with her at Cindy's house among the same circle of friends, which suddenly made the situation in Susan's living room seem far more understandable. Susan might have welcomed him inside because she considered him a trusted friend. As Miller continued investigating Hatley's background, he uncovered something additional. Roughly 1 year after Susan's murder, Hatley's girlfriend had reported him to police, accusing him of sexually assaulting her. He was 20 years old then, and according to the woman, he had attacked her while threatening her with a knife. She also claimed he had confessed that he had killed before and would have no difficulty doing it again. Despite all that, however, Hatley was never charged, and nobody at the police department linked that incident to Susan's murder. After collecting all this information, Detective Miller met with Hatley personally and requested a DNA sample. By then, Hatley was residing near Austin and employed as a warehouse manager. He agreed to meet detectives at the station and almost immediately admitted he had been at Susan's house shortly before she died. He claimed they had been drinking and taking drugs together, but insisted they had not had sex and that he had not murdered her. Detectives knew Hatley was lying because Susan's blood showed no evidence of alcohol or drugs. Even so, he voluntarily agreed to provide a DNA sample. So police released him and waited for the results. The procedure required several days, and while detectives continued waiting, something unforeseen occurred. Officers interviewed Hatley's wife separately, who was also named Susan, and she told them he had physically assaulted and sexually abused her for years. She confessed she was terrified of him and believed he might murder her or harm their daughter and son. However, police assured her they would not allow him to hurt anyone else. Detective Miller chose to use those allegations to arrest Hatley, while the laboratory was still examining the DNA samples. Hatley was placed into custody, and shortly afterward, investigators received the results they had been awaiting. The DNA recovered from the cigarette butts inside Susan's home matched Hatley. By that point, police had both his DNA and fingerprints connecting him to the scene, leaving Hatley with almost no believable way to deny involvement in Susan's murder. When Detective Miller telephoned Susan's father and informed him the killer had finally been identified, her father was convinced he meant Mike. Therefore, when Miller mentioned a different name, he was completely shocked. The same reaction came from nearly everyone who had loved Susan, especially Cindy. She could not even imagine the person responsible for Susan's murder was her own cousin, a man she had remained close to and had always regarded almost like a brother. Hatley's trial was scheduled to start in October 2007, 20 years after Susan was murdered. However, her family did not want to endure a lengthy public trial, hearing his attorneys attack Susan's character and attempt to persuade a jury that Hatley was innocent. Therefore, when prosecutors offered a plea agreement sending Hatley to prison for 30 years in exchange for admitting guilt, Susan's family agreed to support it, and Hatley accepted the deal. He admitted he had gone to Susan's house that night and murdered her, but insisted he remembered almost nothing about it. According to Hatley, he had been extremely intoxicated, and everything remained a blur. Therefore, he claimed he could hardly remember any of the events. Even so, the confession was sufficient, and Hatley was sent to prison. Then, however, Susan's family faced another heartbreaking reality. Because his sentence was imposed under older laws, he qualified for early release. In 2018, after serving just 11 years, He was released for good behavior. For Susan's loved ones, accepting that outcome after everything he had done was nearly impossible. 11 years felt nowhere close to enough, yet there was nothing they could do to change it. Following his release, Hatley relocated to Abilene, Texas, and settled in a trailer near his daughter's home. 3 years later, in 2021, he gave an interview with NBC where he disclosed additional details about what had happened that night, or at least he presented his version of events. According to Hatley, he had not gone to Susan's house intending to kill her. He said he was drunk and lonely and had merely been searching for company. Susan welcomed him inside, brought him a Coke and snacks, and for some time, they talked and laughed together. At one point, Hatley attempted to kiss her, and Susan slapped him. Afterward, according to him, something inside his mind broke, and he completely lost control. Hatley claimed he killed Susan using the pillow, and that everything he did afterward, including holding her beneath the water in the bathtub, was done for 2 reasons. First, he said he wanted to ensure she was truly dead. Second, he wanted to make the scene appear even more horrifying. During the same program, reporters also interviewed Mike, and he described how being accused of Susan's murder had shattered his life. Less than 1 year after that interview aired in December 2021, Hatley was diagnosed with cancer and was expected to begin chemotherapy. However, on December 9th, he was discovered dead inside his trailer. Even then, though, the story was not completely finished. Sometime later, Hatley's trailer and everything inside were sold to a new owner who started examining the belongings Hatley had left behind. While going through the trailer, the man found a stack of handwritten pages and began reading them. To his surprise, the pages seemed to be a personal autobiography Hatley had written shortly before his death, and what he discovered in those pages disturbed him enough to contact Detective Miller. He handed over the papers, and Miller began carefully reading them. Throughout those pages, Hatley wrote about his troubled childhood and claimed he had been physically abused by his own mother. He also admitted violent thoughts had begun entering his mind when he was very young, and that over the years, those thoughts became increasingly difficult for him to control. He further wrote about the influence of alcohol and violent adult material, which he said made his urges even stronger. Hatley also wrote about Susan's murder. According to him, while they regularly spent time together at Cindy's house, he had convinced himself Susan was flirting with him. That was why, when he went to her house that night, he attempted to kiss her. But after Susan slapped him, he claimed everything suddenly became hazy. By the time his mind became clear again, he had already beaten her severely. Even in his own account of events, however, Susan was still alive at that point. Hatley admitted he could have stopped right there, but deliberately chose not to. Susan promised she would not tell anyone what had happened if he spared her, but Hatley had absolutely no intention of stopping. He asked whether she believed in God. When Susan answered yes, he told her, "Start praying." Following the murder, Hatley drove past the police department and considered surrendering himself, but he lacked the courage to do so. During the days afterward, he spoke with friends and relatives about Susan's murder. He admitted those conversations thrilled him. He also regarded Mike as his second victim because Mike immediately became the primary suspect and ultimately spent years carrying the burden of public suspicion. Within the handwritten pages, Hatley also wrote about the assault on his girlfriend, the incident she had reported to police years before. He admitted he had intentionally been violent enough to give her a reason to report him. He wanted somebody to stop him, but he could not bring himself to surrender to police. Ultimately, Hatley attempted to explain everything by saying there had always been 2 sides within him, and that one of those sides was something he described almost like a demon. He claimed he had spent his entire life battling that part of himself. Yet even in those pages, there was no genuine remorse for Susan's murder or for the people he had harmed. After reading everything, Detective Miller started wondering whether there might have been additional victims in Hatley's life. He had spent years working as a truck driver, and his handwritten confession resembled the classic profile of a serial killer. Miller attempted to identify other possible victims, but so far that investigation has not uncovered anything definite. Ultimately, the long and complicated case was finally solved, but it still left a bitter feeling for everyone involved. Susan's family was deeply frustrated that her killer had been identified only nearly 2 decades later, despite another victim having tried to get him arrested for assault and sexual violence. She had even told officers Hatley claimed he had killed before. Despite that, however, her words were not taken seriously. Even after the case was finally solved, Hatley spent only 11 years behind bars. For Susan's family, that felt deeply unjust, especially considering the brutality he had inflicted upon Susan. In late November, Knox County, Tennessee feels chilly outdoors. Yet within the residence on Golden View Lane, the thermostat is set at 90 degrees F. A suffocating reek of bleach, sewer gas, and liquefying plastic brutally overwhelms every sense. Resting in the kitchen, a large stainless steel stockpot remains atop the stove. The heating element remains warm. Within that pot, bubbling inside a poisonous chemical mixture, rests the decapitated head of a 55-year-old mother. This was not the doing of an elusive serial murderer. It was Thanksgiving weekend, while her son had recently returned home for the holidays. Joel Sr. and Lisa Guy represented the essence of the peaceful American dream. Following decades of tireless work, the pair was finally approaching a thoroughly earned retirement. Joel, a pipeline engineering designer, earned recognition for his precise habits and keen intelligence. Lisa handled accounts payable for a nearby engineering company in Knoxville. She was unquestionably the soul of the family, a woman completely dedicated to her children from earlier relationships and the only son she shared with Joel. By autumn 2016, the couple had been together for 31 years. Their two-story brick residence on Golden View Lane served as a comfortable suburban home, yet it was simply far too much room for two empty nesters. They had recently bought a secluded property 80 miles northeast in Surgeonsville. It was a peaceful countryside getaway where they intended to enjoy their later years beyond the grid, free from the corporate grind and devoted completely to one another. Their Knoxville home had already been listed for sale. Packed boxes filled the living room and hallways. Their move into the next chapter of life was already well underway. Nevertheless, achieving that retirement demanded a careful recalibration of their finances. For almost 10 years, Joel and Lisa had shouldered an enormous concealed burden, a relentless financial strain that stopped them from genuinely progressing. That expense was their 28-year-old son, Joel Michael Guy Jr. Although his three older half-sisters had already established independent, prosperous lives, Joel Jr. stayed entirely dependent upon his parents' finances. He lived more than 500 miles away in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. To everyone else, he appeared to be a lifelong student. He spent 9 straight years taking college classes intermittently, supposedly attending Louisiana State University with hopes of becoming a plastic surgeon. In truth, he possessed no defined direction and never maintained stable employment throughout his adult life. His life in Baton Rouge existed inside an impenetrable bubble of profound isolation. He occupied an apartment financed entirely by his mother and father. They covered his rent, tuition, utility bills, and provided a substantial monthly allowance for everyday expenses. Joel Jr. seldom ventured outside. He had no known friends, no romantic involvement, and followed an intensely guarded, isolated lifestyle. Family members considered him exceptionally intelligent, yet disturbingly detached. Whenever he visited Tennessee during the holidays, he became a ghost inside his own home, painfully awkward socially, choosing the privacy of a guest bedroom over the comfort of family gatherings. During conversations, he frequently gazed vacantly, utterly disconnected from everything surrounding him. The difference was unmistakable. Joel Sr. and Lisa were sociable, firmly rooted within their local community, and widely recognized as generous beyond measure. Their son remained an exception they continually needed to support. Yet as the Sarensville relocation quickly drew near, the financial calculations simply stopped making sense. Joel Sr. and Lisa finally reached the most heartbreaking decision any parent could confront. They intended to permanently cut the financial lifeline. They developed a straightforward strategy. They would tell Joel Jr. they would no longer pay his rent, tuition, or everyday living costs. Thanksgiving in 2016 became the final deadline. They made arrangements to bring him from Louisiana, planning to host one last extravagant holiday meal inside the Golden View Lane house. After the dishes were removed, they would seat him and present the ultimatum. It was intended as a decisive step toward adulthood, an essential display of tough love meant to compel their withdrawn son to finally enter the real world. That financial lifeline wasn't merely a convenience for the son residing in Louisiana. It formed the entire structural basis of his existence. Deprived of the dependable monthly payments from his mother and father, his secluded lifestyle would immediately collapse. For almost a decade, he had relentlessly insulated himself from society's expectations, concealed beneath the impenetrable identity of a lifelong medical student. The idea of finding employment, covering his own rent, or confronting the unforgiving realities beyond his Baton Rouge apartment was far more than an irritating inconvenience. For a mind as inflexibly compartmentalized and emotionally detached as his, it represented a devastating existential crisis. The Baton Rouge apartment was an empty void. There were neither visitors, nor ringing telephones, nor unexpected social encounters, only the faint drone of the air conditioner and the unforgiving glow of a computer monitor. As the ultimatum gradually took shape during the weeks before the holiday, something inside that silent apartment irreversibly shattered. The parents sincerely believed they were providing an essential step toward independence. They had devoted months struggling with the decision. The mother's powerful protective nature continually conflicted with the father's practical understanding that they could simply never finance retirement while continuing those payments. They candidly discussed their strained budget with their daughters, acknowledging that supporting their grown son was exhausting their finances completely. The Golden View Lane residence had already been sold. The secluded retreat 80 miles away awaited them. The transition was complete, and the financial flow needed to end. Yet the son never interpreted this as tough love or parental direction. Instead, he viewed it as an unforgivable, deeply personal betrayal. Once the financial lifeline disappeared, the parents supplying it had instantly outlived their value. Even worse, they owned substantial assets. Their life insurance policies totaled $500,000. Proceeds from the upcoming sale of the Knoxville residence would also follow. A sinister, disturbingly clinical reasoning gradually began taking hold. Should they die, those assets would automatically pass to him as their next of kin. The financial assistance would not merely continue, it would become everlasting, and he would never again answer to them. The psychological transformation from dependent son into a calculating predator unfolded with complete methodical precision. It never appeared through one sudden, explosive outburst of anger. Instead, it was carefully orchestrated across several weeks before he even packed a single item of clothing for the holiday. Then the preparation started. He walked through hardware stores and supermarket aisles across Louisiana with a cold, unwavering purpose. He purchased items that absolutely did not belong inside a Thanksgiving suitcase. Heavy-duty clear polyethylene tarps, gallons of highly concentrated acid, powerful industrial drain cleaner, bleach, a durable hunting knife featuring a solid fixed blade. He sensed the weight of those chemicals, the swaying of the caustic liquids inside sturdy plastic containers. He loaded those materials into his vehicle's trunk, essentially assembling a mobile arsenal for devastation before beginning the lengthy drive northeast toward Tennessee. He reached Knox County on Wednesday, November 23rd. Inside the house, the atmosphere had already become chaotic, crowded with partially packed cardboard moving boxes, rolls of packing tape, and the ordinary disorder of a family undergoing major transition. His mother was thrilled to see him, hugging him at the front entrance, entirely unaware of the deadly cargo resting only yards away outside in the driveway. Thanksgiving Day brought everyone together. His older half-sisters gathered to celebrate what should have been a joyful, sentimental milestone, the last holiday meal inside their childhood home before the parents moved away permanently. The dining room buzzed with activity, carrying the rich aroma of roasted meat, silverware clattering against porcelain, and heartfelt conversations about the future. Still, the guest of honor remained like a ghost. He sat physically at the table, yet mentally he seemed countless miles away. He hardly interacted with his siblings. Whenever anyone addressed him directly, he gave short, emotionless replies, his eyes repeatedly shifting toward the wall, avoiding every trace of human contact. He spent nearly the entire afternoon secluded inside his upstairs guest bedroom, pacing across the floorboards, separating himself from the warmth spreading only one floor beneath him. His sisters noticed his strange, withdrawn conduct, dismissing it as his familiar, severe social awkwardness. They had long become accustomed to his unusual behavior over the years. Nobody seated at that table could have imagined he wasn't merely acting antisocial. He silently observed them, estimating timelines and awaiting the witness's departure. Beneath the festive atmosphere, the tension felt intense and unmistakable. The approaching discussion regarding his financial support termination lingered unspoken, yet was keenly sensed by his parents. They had deliberately decided to postpone delivering their final decision until the Thanksgiving celebrations had completely ended. They hoped to maintain the harmony of the holiday dinner, unaware their silence was merely fueling his private countdown. By Friday afternoon, everything fundamentally changed. The house gradually emptied. The half-sisters embraced their mother and father goodbye in the driveway, wishing them a pleasant and safe weekend before returning to their separate lives. They would become the final relatives to see the couple alive. Now only the three remained. Every lingering sound from the holiday disappeared entirely, leaving only the quiet ticking of the living room clock and the soft rustling of cardboard boxes being moved. Their son stayed upstairs behind a shut door. His parents continued their ordinary evening routine, privately rehearsing the extremely painful financial discussion they planned to hold the following morning. They were getting ready to end one chapter of their lives and begin another, completely unaware their son had already decided the conclusion. Upstairs inside the second-floor bedroom, the luggage lay open. The heavy hunting knife was drawn from its sheath. The thick plastic tarps were spread out. The careful, clinical plan conceived during complete isolation in Baton Rouge was ready for execution. He no longer regarded his mother and father as living people with memories and heartbeats. They had become mere obstacles. They represented a financial matter requiring a brutal, violent, irreversible conclusion. The home settled into a long, silent Friday evening. Outside, the temperature gradually fell beneath 40 degrees F. Upstairs, he remained in complete silence, patiently awaiting the perfect opportunity to attack. Saturday, November 26th, the anticipated discussion about ending his financial support never occurred. Joel Sr. and Lisa awoke completely unaware their son's private countdown had finally reached its end. The morning unfolded with the ordinary pace of a normal holiday weekend. Near midday, Lisa picked up her purse and car keys. She drove to a nearby Walmart for groceries, perhaps collecting several last supplies before her son's planned return trip to Louisiana. The heavy front door quietly clicked, closed. The deadbolt locked securely. Joel Sr. was now alone inside the house with his 28-year-old son. Joel Sr. withdrew to his upstairs exercise room. He climbed onto his workout equipment, beginning his regular fitness routine. The house remained completely silent. Further down the hallway, the son opened his luggage. He removed a heavy-duty Bowen's hunting knife. Its blade was thick, fixed, and exceptionally sharp. He quietly walked along the carpeted hallway. There was no warning, no raised argument, no pause. The assault came instantly and with devastating force. The son lunged forward, plunging the blade into his father's chest. Yet the 61-year-old pipeline engineer fiercely resisted. Their struggle became a chaotic, desperately violent clash of strength and bone. They slammed into the exercise equipment. Blood sprayed in a horrifying sweeping arc, covering the walls, drenching the workout equipment, and marking the window blinds. The father desperately fought for survival, frantically grabbing the blade while attempting to disarm his younger, stronger attacker. During the desperate struggle, the son's blood-covered grip suddenly slipped from the handle. The razor-sharp blade cut deeply into his own hands, ripping through the flesh across his fingers. The agony was immediate. The adrenaline overwhelmed every sensation. He subdued the older man. He unleashed an unrelenting series of lethal blows, puncturing the lungs, liver, and kidneys. Joel Sr. crumpled onto the carpet. The solid impact rattled the second-floor floorboards. The savage struggle ended. Complete silence settled across the room, broken only by harsh, uneven breathing. The son stood above the body. Blood poured heavily from his hands, splashing dark crimson across the floor. This marked a serious, hazardous departure from his carefully prepared plan. His personal journal had never anticipated a savage hand-to-hand battle ending in death. Yet the process could not end. His emotional detachment remained unwavering. He seized his father's lifeless body. He started the exhausting task of dragging the enormous 200-pound man from the exercise room into the hallway. The muffled, weighty scrape of a corpse across the carpet. Fibers whispered throughout the deserted second floor. He pulled the body into the master bathroom, dropping it over the porcelain edge of the bathtub. Then he waited. Hours slowly slipped away. The afternoon continued in complete silence. At last, tires crunching over the gravel driveway announced the next moment in the timeline. Lisa had returned home. She entered through the front door, carrying plastic Walmart grocery bags. She stepped into the kitchen, placing everything upon the counter. The house felt silent, unnaturally silent. She failed to detect the faint metallic smell of blood drifting from the stairwell. She never heard the deliberate, heavy footsteps moving down the wooden staircase behind her. The son advanced through the hallway. The hunting knife stayed tightly clenched inside his lacerated hand. He closed in behind his mother while she stood beside the entryway. The attack came instantly. The overwhelming speed and force of the assault hurled her violently onto the floor. Groceries spilled across the linoleum, cans scattered toward the corners. She had no opportunity to comprehend the betrayal, no chance to defend herself. The attack became an excessive display of ruthless mechanical precision. 9 ribs were broken. Her spine was completely severed. The knife moved with horrifying speed until every movement ended. Lisa remained lifeless upon the floor of the home she had spent 3 decades creating. The house had become a tomb. The sun crossed toward the windows, drawing the blinds completely shut. He secured the doors. The murderous stage had ended. Now the systematic erasure had to commence. He collected the supplies obtained in Baton Rouge. The industrial chemicals, the heavy-duty 45-gallon plastic Tupperware bins, the thick polyethylene tarps. He hauled his mother's body upstairs beside his father's. The tremendous physical effort demanded during this stage was enormous, yet he functioned with disturbingly robotic efficiency. He converted the upstairs bathrooms into an abattoir. He methodically dismembered the bodies of the people who had financed his entire existence. Limbs were detached at their joints. Torsos were divided apart. The blades sliced through cartilage and bone. He performed every step precisely as documented inside his private notebook, a horrifying guide describing the exact anatomy and specific tools necessary to dismantle a human body. He placed the divided torsos and limbs inside the large plastic containers. Next, he opened the industrial jugs. He poured an intensely corrosive toxic mixture across the remains, a blend of liquid drain cleaner, bleach, hydrogen peroxide, and sewer line chemicals. The moment the acid contacted biological tissue, a violent chemical reaction erupted. The liquid immediately started bubbling and churning. The bathroom air instantly became poisonous. A suffocating miasma of synthetic cleaning chemicals and decomposing flesh engulfed the second floor, scorching the eyes and burning the throat. It became an overpowering toxic cloud. The final act of depravity was saved for the kitchen. He carried his mother's severed head downstairs. He opened the cupboards and chose a large, heavy-bottomed stainless steel stockpot. He lowered the head inside, immersed it within the corrosive chemical solution, and placed the pot upon the stove. He rotated the control. The blue burner ignited. The solution gradually warmed, eventually reaching a steady rolling simmer. The boiling liquid's hiss reverberated throughout the deserted kitchen. It was a deliberate, horrifying method intended to dissolve facial tissue and eliminate all identifying dental records. He understood chemical decomposition demanded extremely high temperatures. The cold late November air outdoors cooled the house, reducing the acidic reaction. He walked toward the hallway's central thermostat. He forcefully turned the setting to 90 degrees F. To intensify the process, he connected portable space heaters inside the bathrooms and pointed them directly toward the Tupperware bins. The house slowly became an oven. The surrounding warmth caused the acidic mixture to react dramatically faster. Temperatures inside the plastic containers climbed rapidly. The sturdy Tupperware walls gradually warped, swelled, and slowly softened beneath the overwhelming thermal pressure building within. It was now Sunday morning. The house had become a pressurized furnace of biological decay and suffocating chemical fumes. Yet the plan was unraveling. The deep cuts across the son's hands suffered during the original ambush were serious. The bleeding refused to stop. The pain had become completely unbearable. He was unable to complete the cleanup. He tightly wrapped his hands with bandages. He picked up his backpack holding the notebook and exited through the front door. He secured the deadbolt, leaving the heat running and the stove burner still lit. He climbed into his car and entered the interstate, driving directly south toward Baton Rouge to obtain medical care at a student health clinic. He fully expected to return and complete dissolving the evidence. He departed, abandoning behind him a suburban home rapidly descending into an unimaginable hellscape. Monday, November 28th, the corporate offices of Jacobs Engineering buzzed with the familiar, sterile pace of a new work week. Lisa served as the payroll administrator. Her position demanded flawless accuracy, and her attendance history was impeccable. By 9 a.m., her workstation remained completely vacant. Her supervisor noticed the absence immediately. By 10 a.m., multiple calls to her cell phone went straight to an automated voicemail service. This represented a serious departure from her normal routine. Her manager refused to wait until another day passed before sounding the alarm. He notified the Knox County Sheriff's Office, reporting her unusual disappearance, and formally requested a welfare check at the Golden View Lane home. Patrol officers traveled through the quiet, well-kept streets, arriving in the driveway shortly after noon. The outside of the 2-story brick residence displayed an appearance of perfect suburban normality. except for several subtle, profoundly disturbing details. Both family vehicles, a truck and a mid-size SUV, remained parked exactly where they should have been. The mailbox overflowed with unclaimed weekend deliveries. Deputies approached the Soffler front door and knocked with unmistakable authority. Absolute silence. Beyond the thick wood, they heard only the muted, frantic barking of a dog, confined somewhere on the upper floor of the house. They tried the brass doorknob. It remained firmly locked. The deputies began a routine perimeter inspection. They walked along the home's exterior, examining the ground floor windows for indications of forced entry. Shielding the cold glass with their hands to reduce the glare, they looked inside the kitchen. The sight was startling. The linoleum floor was covered in a chaotic jumble of abandoned plastic shopping bags. Packaged sausages, uncooked bacon, and a broken glass syrup bottle lay scattered across the floor in a random, violent pattern. It appeared far less like an accidental spill than the immediate aftermath of a sudden, savage disturbance. That visible evidence immediately established probable cause to enter the residence. Rather than using the main entrance, the deputies eventually discovered an unlocked access point beside the garage. They eased the secondary door open. The environment inside did not merely strike them, it physically overwhelmed them. A solid wave of 90 degrees heat surged through the doorway. The atmosphere was astonishingly thick, saturated with a dense chemical haze that immediately scorched their sinuses and brought tears to their eyes. It was a suffocating, deadly mixture of concentrated bleach, industrial drain cleaner, and a sickening underlying sweetness that seasoned law enforcement officers instantly recognized as the unmistakable odor of advanced biological decay. Choking on the fumes, the deputies drew their sidearms and entered the suffocating thermal chamber. The surrounding heat was unbearable. Every surface throughout the home seemed covered with a thin, poisonous layer of vaporized chemicals. They searched the lower floor using slow, deliberate movements. Passing the scattered groceries, they noticed dark, smeared stains across the floor. Yet the most disturbing feature inside the kitchen was the stovetop. Every dial had been switched to the off position, but a huge heavy-gauge stainless steel stockpot rested directly upon the back burner. The metal continued radiating intense warmth from the recently extinguished flame. The lid remained firmly in place. The chemical smell was overwhelmingly strongest there. The officers carefully documented everything without touching the container. Their disciplined training overcame the instinctive human urge to reveal its contents. They had absolutely no idea that only inches beneath their gloved hands, submerged within a corrosive chemical slurry, rested the household matriarch. The overwhelming psychological burden of the scene weighed heavily upon them. They advanced carefully toward the central staircase, their flashlights exposing broad, pronounced drag marks carved deeply through the carpet fibers. The temperature rose even further while they climbed toward the second floor. The dog's barking became increasingly frantic, echoing behind a closed guest bedroom door. The hallway carpet was saturated with dark, rust-colored stains. The officers entered the upstairs exercise room. The walls resembled abstract canvases of arterial blood spray. Costly workout equipment lay overturned and destroyed. It stood as the unmistakable center of a violent life-or-death struggle. Following the main blood trail through the hallway, the deputies arrived at the master bathroom. The door stood slightly open. Inside, the temperature reached its highest point. 2 portable electric space heaters operated at full capacity, aimed directly toward the center of the tiled floor. Positioned beneath the relentless thermal glare sat 2 45-gauge plastic storage bins. Their thick polyethylene walls were visibly warping, buckling, and melting under the intense thermal and chemical pressure building within. A highly corrosive liquid churned violently inside the sealed containers. Lying upon the floor beside the bases of the bins, entirely separated from their owner, rested a pair of human hands. The deputies immediately withdrew. They made no effort to open the melting bins. They never returned to the kitchen to remove the stockpot lid. The enormity of the atrocity far surpassed ordinary patrol procedures. They retreated onto the front lawn, desperately gasping for cool, fresh air, and radioed for a specialized hazmat unit together with the Major Crimes Division. Within an hour, Golden View Lane filled with emergency vehicles, heavily armored trucks, and multiple layers of yellow crime scene tape. The neighborhood emerged from its post-holiday sluggishness into an unimaginable nightmare. Local residents stood across their manicured lawns in disbelief, watching personnel dressed in heavy, fully encapsulated chemical suits entering the quiet brick home. Rumors spread immediately. The community, familiar only with minor property crimes and traffic violations, was stunned by the realization that an act of cartel-level butchery had unfolded directly beside them. The social impact was immediate, a shared, terrified whisper about what could possibly demand a full-scale hazardous materials response at a quiet retirement residence. The Knox County Regional Forensic Center had never responded to a residential call of this scale. When specialized hazardous materials teams finally entered the Golden View Lane residence, they encountered something far beyond a conventional crime scene. They stepped into an active, extremely unstable chemical setting, wearing fully encapsulated level of protective suits equipped with self-contained breathing apparatuses. The technicians first had to ventilate the structure before homicide investigators could safely enter through the front entrance. The surrounding heat had driven the poisonous vapor deep into the drywall, carpeting, and ceiling tiles. Industrial fans were placed at the doorways, forcing the deadly miasma of vaporized acid and decomposing flesh into the cold November air outside. Only afterward could the grim task of examining the interior commence. Their immediate priority involved halting the continuing destruction of forensic evidence. The heavy-duty plastic bins inside the master bathroom were structurally collapsing. Their synthetic walls leaked and bubbled beneath the overwhelming thermal and chemical stress. Hazmat technicians employed specialized chemical-resistant pumps to cautiously remove the corrosive slurry surrounding the human remains contained within. Downstairs, the stainless steel stockpot on the kitchen stove was documented, photographed, and carefully lifted from the burner. Veteran forensic pathologists, men and women who had devoted decades to documenting fatal accidents, gang violence, and catastrophic trauma, repeatedly stepped beyond the perimeter simply to regain their composure. The extraordinary mechanical destruction of the human body felt utterly foreign within the peaceful, affluent suburb. The first investigative challenge involved determining a credible motive. The astonishing brutality of the dismemberment strongly indicated a message killing, the type of calculated, theatrical violence commonly connected with organized crime syndicates or deliberate cartel executions. Detectives thoroughly searched the perimeter for evidence of forced entry, damaged deadbolts, or broken window glass. They discovered nothing. The doors remained locked from within. Moreover, the victim's youngest son was entirely missing. His vehicle had vanished from the driveway. His cell phone was unreachable. For a short, desperate interval, investigators developed a theory that an outside hit squad had invaded the home, murdered the parents, and kidnapped the son as a captive. The neighborhood was gripped by this account. Speculation spread rapidly across local social media platforms, creating a deeply tangible atmosphere of fear throughout the community. Doors were securely deadbolted. Security systems were activated. The belief that a professional assassination team was operating within their peaceful streets completely destroyed the community's sense of security. That cartel theory collapsed the instant crime scene technicians started examining the second-floor guest bedroom. The room was largely vacant, except for several discarded belongings and an abandoned backpack lying beside the bed. Inside the canvas bag, investigators uncovered a plain, spiral-bound college notebook. It contained neither academic notes nor medical school study materials. Instead, it held a complete step-by-step operational plan for mass murder. Detectives opened the notebook and discovered pages of meticulously organized bulleted lists written in careful, deliberate handwriting. The entries described a terrifyingly clinical plan. The author had specified the precise supplies required, including instructions to purchase heavy carving knives and a sledgehammer for systematically crushing bones. The notebook provided exact, methodical directions, explaining how to saturate the house with particular chemicals to eliminate forensic evidence. It included explicit reminders to flush smaller biological fragments through the toilets to clear the drains, alongside a direct instruction to raise the home's thermostat to 90 degrees and artificially hasten the chemical decomposition. Most incriminating of all, the pages contained detailed financial calculations. The writer had carefully calculated the precise worth of his parents' life insurance policies, retirement savings accounts, and the anticipated equity from the pending sale of the Golden View house. Those assets belonged to the victims. The handwriting belonged to their missing son. The entire direction of the investigation changed instantly. The son was not a captive. He was not another victim. He was the ultimate predator. The notebook established beyond any doubt that the horrific violence was neither a crime of passion nor an abrupt psychotic collapse. Instead, it was a cold, meticulously pre-planned financial transaction. The suspect had merely underestimated the immense physical stamina necessary to dismantle 2 adult bodies. Together with the structural limitations of plastic storage bins, the deep lacerations suffered during the fierce defensive struggle with his father had compelled him to abandon the cleanup and escape the state. Knox County investigators immediately shifted from a rescue mission to a multi-state manhunt. Arrest warrants charging 2 counts of first-degree murder were fast-tracked. Detectives contacted the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, forwarding the suspect's vehicle details, license plate, and most recent residential address. By Monday evening, covert surveillance had surrounded the apartment complex in Louisiana. Plainclothes federal agents and tactical teams observed the perimeter, watching the suspect's vehicle resting quietly within the parking lot. They remained throughout the night, maintaining complete radio silence. The outcome came Tuesday morning, November 29th. The suspect left his Baton Rouge apartment, walking deliberately toward his vehicle. He showed no urgency. He never checked his blind spots or glanced behind himself. He carried himself with the same detached, robotic sluggishness that had characterized his entire adult life. Tactical teams closed in from several concealed angles, overwhelming the parking lot and trapping his vehicle while armed agents surrounded him, ordering his immediate compliance. He offered absolutely no resistance. He never questioned why officers were taking him into custody. He did not pretend confusion or inquire about his family's well-being back in Tennessee. He simply lifted his arms in surrender. The arresting officers quickly observed that both hands were tightly covered with thick white medical bandages. His face remained entirely expressionless, an emotionless mask showing neither fear, astonishment, nor regret. The mastermind behind the Golden View Lane nightmare was finally in custody. September 2020, the Knox County courtroom remained completely silent while prosecutors carefully presented the notebook's contents. Jurors were required to examine the uncensored crime scene photographs, the melted bins, the corrosive destruction, the overwhelming mechanical butchery. Throughout everything, the defendant remained seated like a carved marble statue. He displayed absolutely no visible reaction. There were no tears, no bowed head in remorse, no emotional outbursts of denial. Even while forensic pathologists explained the precise methods used to dismember the people who had brought him into the world, his expression stayed completely empty. Occasionally, he wrote notes across a legal pad, utterly disconnected from the seriousness of the proceedings. The defense possessed almost nothing useful to present. The physical evidence proved overwhelming, while the financial motive was plainly recorded in his own handwriting. The jury needed fewer than 3 hours to reach its decision. The verdict was unanimous. He was convicted on every count of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. The presiding judge imposed the harshest sentence permitted: 2 consecutive life terms. The financial transaction he had planned with such methodical precision ended inside a permanent concrete prison. The tragedy surrounding the Golden View Lane murders rests within the deeply disturbing paradox behind the motive. Joel and Lisa died not because they were neglectful, abusive, or absent. They were murdered solely because they cared excessively. Their final error came from profound parental love, a desperate effort to finally guide a dependent son toward an independent life. Instead, they had raised their own executioner, a man whose sole answer to independence became complete annihilation. Thanks for watching Crime Chapter 51. If you enjoyed today's cases, let us know in the comments which one stayed with you the most, and tell us where you're watching from. If you love long-form true crime documentaries, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next case.